Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the latest edition of Free Thought Hour, the show where we have my co host, Tercia, who is in South Africa. How the devil are you, Tercia?
I am very fine, thank you. I'm free. I am cross free, cross free. I have to plug for our new
Yeah,
organization. But
she,
besides that, summer in South Africa, and my dad's better than last week this time.
oh, that's
And
good news. Yes. Mm,
very good news, thanks to amazing scientific and medical advances. And yeah, I'm all by my lonesome. The family, some of them are on their way back from the Free State, others are still in the Free State, and some
mhm,
are on the town. So I've got the whole
mhm.
internet to myself.
Oh, Home
Yeah.
Alone.
Yes, yes, yes. With the four cats and the two dogs.
Yes, and no crosses. You're cross fry.
Kruisvrij. Come on, John, say that.
Kreuz fry.
Well, not fry, fry, as in
Ah,
a.
kreuz fry.
Well done. I give
That's the
you
best I can do.
you,
You
you
have, that's
lovely.
it.
You
I can't do nothing better. That's it.
100%, not 95%.
Okay.
Trust. Well
Well,
done.
we have got a guest, and he's not here at the moment, but we've had already a brief connection with him. But he's got I don't know what difficulties he's got, but he's disappeared. He'll be back in a minute, I expect. And he had a terrible accident when he was 13, and he lost his sight. And I want to tell you that it was as a result of, in fact, he'll tell you in a minute, I expect, but it was as a result of doing what I used to do at 13 too, which was fiddle with explosives.
I was going to say, was it a chlorine bomb type thing?
Well, back in those days, you could get your hands on all sorts of ingredients that you could make gunpowder and similar explosives from, which you can't now. They've banned all these substances because, of course, there's been terrorists have been using them to make serious bombs. And back in my day, you could play with this stuff in your shed and have a little bit of fun, you know. And being of a scientific bent and keen on chemistry, I did it at home too. And so you're thinking of, I think, sodium chlorate, which was the weed killer oxidant that was available in those days, and you could use it as a substitute for potassium nitrate, which is the main ingredient of gunpowder. So you added sodium chlorate, a little bit of charcoal, and a little bit of sulfur, and you had the ingredients for a bomb. I wasn't the only person doing it. You know, there were quite a few people up and down the country who were playing relatively harmlessly with exciting chemical reactions. One of the ingredients that I used was very strong ammonium hydroxide and iodine. And with that, you could make, have I got this right? No, it wasn't strong. It was, um, it was, it might have been, yeah, it might have been ammonium hydroxide such a long time ago. But what you made using that reaction was something called nitrogen triiodide, which is a very unstable substance. It's so unstable, you've only got to touch it and it decomposes instantaneously. And so you make this stuff, it's liquid, and then it dries out as crystals. And I spilled some on the floor. So when it dried out, the dog was walking around and setting off these little crystals with his paws. And when they go, a little puff of violet smoke, iodine, comes off. That was the sort of fun thing that we did back then. You can't do it now.
Thank
Help.
heavens. But John, it's not as much as people with a scientific bent thing. It's a boy thing. and I don't want to be sexist. It's a boy thing. Boys want to blow things up. Boys want to give them a stick and they'll turn it into a sword. Give them anything and they'll turn it into a gun. And that's why we need more female women leaders in the world, because we are much less violently inclined. But talk about our guest who is completely blind.
Yes. Mm.
So we've had some of our regular viewers might know that the town that I live in, Worcester, houses the first and oldest school for the blind, as well as school for the deaf, as well as school for the deaf blind, in possibly on the continent, if I'm not mistaken, but definitely in southern Africa. And just
Mhm.
last, one of the surgeons who treated my dad told me about his oldest son, whom I plan to get as a guest on our show as
Mhm.
well. He
Mhm.
was born with a serious eye defect, and he turned blind at the age of 5.
Oh. Mm.
And just last Friday, this past Friday, in fact, he was awarded the. He's the first ever person to be awarded 2 doctoral theses
Mhm.
in the Faculty of Law at Stellenbosch University. He
Mm.
has spent some time working in London. He's also either a father or a dad to be,
Mhm.
very, very smart. But living in Worcester and living where I now live, in fact, the house that I live in is round the corner from the Institute for the Blind. And I
Um,
see visually impaired people walking
mm.
past my house several times a day, because
Mm.
the main supermarket is also down our street, and
Yeah.
it's very convenient for them. And I just have the utmost respect for people who are visually impaired. And I was
Mm.
thinking about our guest all of this week, because one of the things this doctor told us about his son is that even though he's highly intelligent, I mean, he holds 2 PhDs. Um,
Yes. That's a
when,
clue.
absolutely, when they go out to supper, um, the waitress will ask his wife what he'd like to eat. And we are so inclined to not know how to treat people with
It's
anything.
difficult. Yes. Yes.
I regard myself as very fortunate in living where I do, because we in this town, we are so used to seeing visually impaired people, blind people,
Mm.
and people with various disabilities. In fact,
Mm.
it's taught me so much to be comfortable, um, because most of our discomfort is because we don't know how to treat these
Yes.
people, and
Yes.
and we need to be taught how to be comfortable and recognize they're just like us. They just can't see or they can't hear.
Mm.
And it's so nice for me. Just Tuesday afternoon, I walked to the shop, and we have a blind barista at the
Oh yeah.
cafe. Just yes,
Mhm.
and,
Mhm.
he was walking, and they have those they're yellow, but they have these strips with bobbles on them. I've seen them in the UK as well at certain crossings, but here in
Mm.
Worcester,
Yes.
they are
Yes.
spread regularly along the routes that the
Mm.
blind folk follow. And he was
Yes.
walking his cane, and I could see that he was sort of looking out for where the bubbles were. And I was
Mm.
coming across the road, and I just I knew he heard me coming along, and I said, "Good afternoon," and I said, "You've got to go 2 inches to the right, and then you'll find what you're looking for." And we had such a nice interaction. And if you being helpful, it's the same whether you're helpful to an old person like you who falls downstairs, or a young person like me. who, uh, yeah, so I'm hoping we can get Tyler. What's happened to him? Is he struggling?
I don't know. He's not come back yet, but We did briefly hear him, didn't we, just before we started live streaming?
Yeah, you did. Well, talking
Anyway,
about
while I've got you, I want to show you this. I don't know whether you've seen this before, but it's a book.
nuggets.
The Book of Nuggets.
Is it one of your books that you're going to sign virtually?
No, it's not. No.
Okay, so tell me about it.
The Book of Nuggets was compiled by Juliet Solomon. There.
Okay.
And that lady, she lost her mother through kidney disease. So she decided to raise money for kidney research. And this is how she decided to do it. She compiled a book of nuggets, little short sentences of wisdom or wit or something.
I like that.
Yes, and all the proceeds go to kidney research. So the people who've contributed to this are absolutely amazing. Just let me read you a list of some of the people. We've got Stephen Fry, Sir Christopher Bonington, mountaineer.
Not
Michael
familiar.
Palin,
Confess.
Sir Michael
wow.
Palin.
Wow.
Sir Terry Waite, who was imprisoned, you know, that in Beirut for a while. We have Sir David Jason, the actor from
No,
Only Fools and Horses.
Palin,
No?
is that Monty? Just go back. Michael Palin is Monty Python?
Yes, yes. Delia Smith, broadcasting cook.
Okay.
Yeah. Jeffrey Boycott, cricketer.
Is Alice
Sadiq,
Roberts?
probably, but look, there's so many pages.
Whoa.
Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London. Dawn French. Robin Ince. There's all sorts of people in here. And you won't believe this. There's me.
It's the only one I know in person, so it's the most important one. Good for you. What's your nugget?
There's my nugget.
I can't read it. You'll have to read it to us. Come on.
I'll read it to you. I was hoping you would ask. I thought you'd never ask, so I'll read you my nugget.
I just have to tell our audience, John, we didn't plan this. I knew nothing about this, so I'm really asking. You didn't prompt me to ask. I want to hear your nugget.
This is off the cuff. That's right. Yes. So it's been about, I don't know, 6 months in compilation and printing and everything. It's a hardcover, as you can see, and it's £20 if you want one. And I'm Builders John Richards, president of Atheism UK, and here's my nugget. Ignorance is not bliss. Wouldn't you rather know whether a previously unseen snake that's crossing your path is venomous or delicious when barbecued? Survival has favored suspicion towards the unfamiliar. The quicksand of ignorance and doubt is scary. Consequently, we crave certainty. Unfortunately, only one thing is absolutely certain, and that's that everything will change. Why is this? It's because our universe contains time. Time is an unstoppable conveyor belt, a continuous procession of alterations. Having no static instance means that nothing can retain its original properties, its identity. This makes truth subjective, provisional, and temporary until the end of time. Perhaps we shouldn't be dogmatic.
That's a little bit of gold there. I read a brilliant quote this week. It's John Smith, I think, is the person whom I don't know, but the quote is, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance.
Yes, indeed. Yes. Mm. That's one of those things I wish I'd said.
Well, you're almost there. You're almost there. One of these days. One of these days. But it's um, when you mentioned time and how things are always changing. I did think you were going to say one thing is certain, and that's death and taxes. But
Yes. Well, I incorporated those by saying everything will change, and that includes debt and taxes. Yeah. Yeah.
yep, taxes will change. They mostly increase.
Indeed. Yes. Yeah.
It's, yes, is our guest ready? You just give me just
No,
share.
he hasn't turned up yet. So I've got another opportunity to show you something else that I've been doing recently,
Go ahead.
because you haven't been to the UK this year, so
Oh
I
no.
I wasn't able to involve you in any of the events that I've been staging or have been invited to take part in.
So
So
sad.
on when was this? It must have been about July. I was invited by British Forces Broadcasting Services,
Oh, nogal nee.
which you may or may not have heard of.
I
I
haven't
was
heard of.
invited
Is it like in the army or perhaps?
to, sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
It, I was invited to be interviewed by a student there who's doing a PhD, and his PhD included interviewing me. So let me just tell you what BFBS is, British Forces Broadcasting Services, because it began with the advent of radio. And so and of course, at that time, there was the remnants of an empire. So Britain had forces overseas.
Okay, hang
And
on, John. The advent of radio, would that have been the late 1910s or
uh,
later
20, 20,
1920s?
22, I think. Yeah.
Okay,
In,
okay. I
in
just
ter-
needed to place myself in history.
yeah. Mm. In terms of the first BBC broadcasts, well, it wasn't called BBC then. It was a company, not a corporation. But anyway, BFBS, British Forces Broadcasting Services, attempted to keep our overseas soldiers and sailors and airmen in touch with folks at home by the means of radio. So they had a schedule of programs that included, for example, playing records. So they could request a record. People at home could request a record for their son wherever their son was. A lot of
And
it
they
was in a lot of it was
and
in Germany at that time, but
okay,
it
obviously.
it could have been other parts of the world too. And the son could request a record to be played for their parents at home. So
And
this was what British Forces Broadcasting Services did, and then it went into television. So they actually made video shows as well, but it still exists. So even though there's no empire anymore, and we don't have such a military presence worldwide, but we still have a few, stations and ships about the world. So it still exists and it still serves the same purpose. And I was invited along to be interviewed for this student on their staff to do his PhD. And I can play you a clip from that interview.
what was it about? Just give us some background. What is he? What is the topic of his PhD?
His PhD was, he was sort of comparing and contrasting different religions, including, the non-religious. And so I was the representative of the atheist side of things. And so he asked me the question, when did you decide to become an atheist? You see?
Okay.
And this is my reply.
What made you to decide to become an atheist then?
I didn't have to decide. I contend that we are all born atheists because religions consist of a body of information that has to be imparted. And since we are born without language, it takes about a year before we can speak. That can't be done until after the age of 1 at least. So I didn't have to make a decision to become one. The only people who do have to make a decision to become an atheist are those who got indoctrinated when they were infants, and after a while they begin to question, look at it more critically. I know several people who have done this, and then they choose not to be a theist. So we all start out, it's our birthright to be atheists, and I chose my parents, luckily, not to be religious. I wasn't raised in a religious community, and so I've escaped ever being inducted into a belief system.
John Richards, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You know that you and I disagree. What's happening now? I have an echo.
No, you sound all right here.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, you do know that you and I have to schedule, shall we call it a discourse on the whole notion of free will? And every time I hear anybody say these days that you decide or we decide, I want to talk about Robert Sapolsky's book because it's absolutely amazing. And we need to, I think next year when we don't have a guest scheduled, we could perhaps do a little talk about Robert Sapolsky. That is, if we can't get him as a guest, because I'd love to have him on. And just today, I had a fantastic afternoon.
Can I just ask you whether what I said in that clip resonates with your personal experience?
Part of it, although
you decided to quit Christianity and become an atheist, didn't you?
I don't think I decided. I think it was determined by a variety of factors that I'm still not aware of, all of them, that I would eventually convert. And I agree with it's our birthright not to be indoctrinated. But I'm a little bit more skeptic. I think we are, as a species,
You're mistaking the intention behind the idea of birthright. I don't think we have a birthright not to be indoctrinated. I think that's, there are so many victims of indoctrination, which is done by the parents. So if only there was a human right not to be indoctrinated, that would be an improvement. But I think that what we have a right at birth to be is not religious, because religions have to be taught. And
I'm not so sure that religions have to be taught. And I'm saying this with all the caveats of about 20,000 years of civilization, but I think there's more evidence that shows that we are naturally inclined, as on a bell curve of attributes. I think our species is more inclined to be religious than to not be religious. And I think what you said in your nugget about having you mentioned the snake and knowing, because of that, if you think of Michael Shermer and the type A error and the type B error, so if you hear the rustle in the wind and you assume it's a lion, your chances of surviving are better. And because religions, in a sense, play on, if you don't know what it is, assume it's an agent. And
sure. Well, what you're telling me is that we are born curious and wary. You're not telling me that we are born religious. And in fact,
no, I'm not saying we're born religious. I'm saying those attributes, the being curious is, if there was a hierarchy, more people are wary and the wariness overrides the curiosity. Because if you were more curious than wary, your chances of surviving. And therefore, I'm not saying we are born religious. I'm saying as a percentage of the population on a bell curve, more of us are born with the inclination to think up religions, because religion.
Right.
That's
Okay.
right.
Okay. So you're not saying that we've got a God-shaped hole. You're saying you're saying that our mindset to seek answers to mysteries, to form patterns that explain circumstances, drives us to invent stories about
Yes.
God.
Well, not, if you want to call it God, about an agent that we have come to give in English and in Afrikaans and in other language,
Yeah.
in
Well,
to name it
if it's
God.
if it's not a godly agent, it can't explain anything, can it? It has to be powerful, and yeah, there you go.
The interesting thing is, it doesn't have to be all powerful.
No.
It just has to be more powerful than we are. And
Yes.
there's somebody whom I've wanted as a guest on our show. It's Dr. John Wathey, Wathey. If he's been a guest on Derek Lambert's show Myth Vision, and I've watched a couple of presentations. He also wrote a book about the things that I'm talking to you now. And if you look at he draws such beautiful parallels between infants and religious experiences and how people the rituals of religion, and it's universal. Religious people go like this, they raise their arms and they bow.
Yeah.
And that's the infantile
Yeah.
grab. It's a reflex.
Yes,
And
dogs do it. Small dogs. If you've ever had one of those dogs you can carry about in a handbag, you'll know that if you put them down and they run around for a bit, they get tired, and then they come to you like this. Pick me up. Pick me up. Yeah.
And they certainly this from the moment that we come into this world, we expect an agent that is more powerful than we are to take care of us. And that never leaves us. It's been well documented that even very old people, when they die, they want their mothers. They want that person that takes care of them, that caretaker. And there's a reason that God is called the Father, and because it's the kid. Oh, John, you read something. Talk about the Father. You read something that you wrote. Can I read something that I wrote this week?
Okay. By the way, not all religions refer to the God as a father.
No, some refer to it as a mother, and all variety of other things. Okay, but in the Christian religion, which is the dominant religion,
some would disagree.
Well, it depends on what your definition of Christian is, but
no, well, it depends on whether you're counting those who tick that box on a form that they're applying to do something, or whether you're counting those that actually practice and do things regularly that fit with the requirements of that religion, because there's a lot of the former but very few of the latter.
Granted, but as far as statistics are concerned, if you count the boxes that have been ticked, the vast majority of people on the planet identify, whether they truly do it or not, they identify as Christian. So this piece of writing is dedicated.
2 billion. It's 2 billion Christians.
Yeah.
So it's not the majority of the people on the planet. It's a minority.
Well, however it may be, this is dedicated to those who tick the box as being Christian.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's not long, and I won't sing it. Father in heaven, what is your proper name? How is it to be hallowed?
Mhm.
Where and when exactly will thine kingdom come?
Mhm.
Do we really want your will to be done? Is it done on in heaven as on earth, with horror, pain, disease, and a precious few spurts of mirth? Most of your children do not get their daily bread. Are we to forgive like you forgive? Only after blood sacrifice and torture of an innocent scapegoat? Who leads us into temptation when you determine our every thought? Who is the evil one? They say that yours is the kingdom, the glory, and the power, Father, Son, and Spirit. Sounds like a dictatorship. Do I have to say, Amen? What if I find glory in things like doing good? What if I have no fondness for an almighty king? What if I believe it's power that corrupts? Will you forgive me if I pass and do not say Amen?
Mm. Very good. Who did you write that for? Was that for your school children?
You must be crazy. No, I wrote this um, because of a post on Facebook. I'm not sure if it was international or what, but there's a new campaign on Facebook where Christians who are persecuted, apparently they're not allowed to post the Lord's Prayer on Facebook, and in which I think is nonsense. I don't think
Mm.
it's true. But there's this persecution complex, and now, and I don't know if maybe it's just an Afrikaans South African thing. So in
Mm.
response to the persecution, to show God that they will stand up and fight for his rights, they're posting the Lord's Prayer far and wide, and I get these
Mm.
posts, and I was inspired. Um,
Ah. Mm.
and I wrote my own version of the Lord's Prayer. I
Yeah.
also did an Afrikaans one, but I won't regale you with the Afrikaans one.
No, thank you. No.
But
Wouldn't mean very much to me. But
basically,
you touched on some interesting points in there, I noticed, because um, the whole thing was an attempt to denigrate the audience, wasn't it? It was all about getting them to submit to this higher power and his kingdom and his will be done and all that stuff. And that, to my mind, is the clue behind the real purpose, the hidden purpose of religions. It's all about getting to control a massive population, a few representatives on earth, God's representatives, self-elected, who want to have a load of submissive sheep. They even call it a flock, don't they? There's a parallel there. So this is, and it was Bishop Shelby Spong. He's dead now, but he said a lovely thing about Christianity is in the control business, and that's why we want people to be born again, because when you're born again, you're a child and you can control a child. You can't control an adult. So this was the whole reason for the born again Christian movement.
I'm a little bit less cynical than you are in that regard. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm more of an optimist. I agree with everything you've said, but I don't think most people are most. I'm I'm more charitable, or perhaps more naive, in thinking that most religious leaders, or many religious leaders, I don't think they think about it as they wanting to control others so much. I don't think they think about it consciously, and I don't think most believers think about this
Mm.
aspect that it is
Well,
about control. But ultimately, I mean, I say it in my Lord's Prayer:
mm,
power.
yes,
Um,
yes, yes. Well,
because
whether
power.
the leaders themselves could have been duped by this whole shenanigans. So maybe they don't think of themselves as a sort of evil manipulator controlling their flock. They think they're doing good. In fact, I'm
Yeah,
sure some of them do, because one of my former friends, we're no longer friends, not from my side, but he blanks me now. But one of my former friends is a pastor at a local evangelical church. And so we used to meet up for coffee, and we had a couple of debates together. He got me to speak at a church in Chichester. It was him against me, why he was a Christian, why I wasn't. And but the thing is that he thinks he's doing good. He's fully on board with the idea that he's serving this master and helping the other people to see the light of the need to worship. And I think it's all nonsense. We don't need to. The idea of worship came about back in the Middle Ages, when the big man on a horse with a whip controlled the people who were beneath him, the serfs. That's the idea. That's where the word Lord started to be used. And that's where you started to think, I better bow down to this guy because I don't want to be whipped. And that was incorporated into him up there, the Father in heaven, the Lord in heaven, the person who needs to be worshipped in heaven. It's all human stuff.
absolutely. I want to ask you about this friend that you say uh, he's not comfortable being your
No,
friend. But
it's a
and
shame. Yeah,
yes,
I'm happy to tell you about him. He We met in a playground because we both had small children. Okay, so I was there with our small, probably only maybe two or one small child. I can't remember how many years ago it was, but they're all grown now. And he was there with his version, his family of small children. And so we started talking, and we looked at the children having fun, doing the slides and the swings and everything. And so we exchanged views, and I explained that he was just back from America, where he'd been training in a seminary in, I think it was in one of the Colorados, no, the Carolinas, where he went to um, an evangelical church, a Baptist church. And there's about 30,000 different ones of those. And he
every
specifically,
southern
sorry?
southern there's about 30,000 on every corner, and
Yes, exactly.
was
And they're all
it
wrong. They're all wrong except for the one that he has decided to join. It was the new biblical, I don't know, I can't remember the name of it, Baptists. But they were supposed to have seen the correct way to interpret Christianity. Anyway, I explained to him that I wasn't a Christian. I think this was before I was very active in the atheist movement. But so he decided that we should have conversations, and I think it was every week, we met for coffee in one of the local coffee shops, and he tried to make me see his point of view, and I explained what was wrong with his point of view. And this went on, and then we had these debates. He staged one in his church, and I still have the video of at least my presentation that was done there.
man? I really respect what he did. I mean,
Yeah, he's a lovely fellow. Yeah. Mm.
that I don't know a pastor in my town who's that brave. I mean, I've tried to not even stage a public debate. I just tried to have, I've invited a number of pastors in our town to just have a discourse, and I'm fine to do it in private, although I did want to record it, but I was fine to and one of them agreed to a private chat beforehand, and I was there for 2 hours, and well, he said he'd get back to me, and that's more than a year, more than a year ago. But John, I understand, because I am really scary. You know, you've met me. I'm a really scary person. I do scare people. I'm extremely. I'm massive. I'm huge. I tower above everybody else, and I'm you know. And now I look
like, especially with your new haircut. Yes, that's.
a Jane. I mean, I just need a gun or maybe a sword rather. I'd rather go for a sword and a helmet. But I want to ask you, and I know you can't answer on your friend's behalf, but I have a suspicion, because that's my experience, and with my parents the same. So our listeners might not know that my parents deconverted after this in their late 60s, and they still not struggling, but it still leads to interesting conversations. And most people just assume that they are religious, because most South Africans are religious, and especially of a certain age, then it's almost guaranteed that you have to be religious. And I've discussed this with both my parents, and they don't rub their non-believer status in anybody's face, but South Africa, when you meet somebody, and my folks are fairly recent residents in Worcester, and when you meet somebody new, the first you are, good day, pleased to meet you, where are you from? And the second thing you ask is, what church do you attend? And
Nobody do that here.
No, that's what you do in South Africa, because we very much like the United States in that regard. Religion and going to churches is an integral part of society. It's an integral part of your social life. And my folks are now open to the extent that they say we don't go to church, and that's already frowned upon. And so they've met some people and they've befriended them, and it's noticeable how uncomfortable old and new friends are with my folks being non-religious. And it's not as if my parents want to talk about it. They want to talk about it.
Yes.
But when my parents answer questions honestly, their interlocutors shy away, or they get aggressive, and they say my parents have offended them, or they feel offended. And I have this idea that the reason they're not really offended, but for them to hear another living person voice the doubt that they've had to deal with most of their life. That's a very uncomfortable feeling to have. It's fine to have those doubts and that sit there in the back of your mind, and you fight to suppress it. Now, you won't know about this because you've never been a Christian, but I know about this.
Well, I have a theory as to why they are offended.
I don't think I think they just don't like hearing somebody say out loud what they think.
Well, if I said to you, you're wrong about gravity, would you be offended?
Well, it depends. If I believe that gravity didn't exist, and
I mean, if I said that I believe that gravity makes you go up, would you be offended?
No, because I know you were wrong. I know you were wrong.
Exactly. And you'd think that I was a nutter for believing this. Right.
Yes.
Now, that's the case. That's the case with evidential unfalsified information.
Yes.
You don't need to have an emotional reaction like being offended towards it. Okay? Because it is plain and simple fact. Religions aren't like that. There
Absolutely.
are no there are no facts that support the existence of a God. So the only way believers can nail themselves to that mast is emotionally. They have to assert vehemently their belief that this is true, because we know there's nothing to substantiate it being true. So you've got to shout it as true. And that's why if you burst that bubble, they feel offended.
Yes, and it's cognitive dissonance because most
Mm.
rational people, some part of your brain knows that I, it, you know some part of you, and if you don't know, there's some part of you that there's cognitive dissonance. I mean, that's the psychological term for it,
Mm.
and that's a very uncomfortable position for us to be in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
So
and you,
it goes back to my nugget.
it goes
If you
back
know,
to, yep.
if you doubt is uncomfortable, it's not bliss. Ignorance is not bliss. But no, knowledge is bliss. Knowledge
No,
is, it's knowing that this snake is not going to poison you. You can actually cook it and it's delicious. That's what's bliss.
ignorance can be bliss, but only if you are truly, truly, truly 100% ignorant. Then,
Well,
I mean, if you don't
I
know
don't.
what you
Yeah,
then
but I don't think that's a blissful situation. What you're getting onto there is simply being honest about the lack of knowledge, because that's the
okay,
other thing. That's the other thing that comes out of their mindset, which forces them to be offended when you contradict it or challenge it. It's that dogmatic attitude, and the the uh, the lack of certainty which they crave, which they can't put up with any criticism. So this is why in that example you just gave, uh, it's okay in science to say I don't know. It's not a blissful state,
no.
but it's an honourable state, and it's an honest state. And in fact, that's how science works. It's by probing at what we don't know and
Yeah.
trying to find out what the explanation could be. But we're not blissful about it, but we might be sort of comfortable with admitting that we don't know something. But the religious people are not. They want to assert that they do know everything and it's their God, not anybody else's. It's their God. And of course, if you've got that mindset, then you're going to have to suffer a lot from, what did you call it? Cognitive dissonance.
Dissonance. And of course, then we all know that the best attack is the best way of defense. So, and you attack that person by saying, I'm offended. And when, yeah, it's just, you have to deal
Sci-
with so much.
Scientists are never offended. Well, they shouldn't be offended. If some scientists suggest one speculative solution and another scientist suggests another speculative solution to the mystery, there's nothing to be offended about. They're just testing out possible explanations, and one of them will be proved right after the investigation has been done. But it's not my possession that I'm going to feel, ooh, that's mine, I'm offended.
Well,
It's
you're right about the scientific method, but let's not put scientists on a pedestal. Let's not be accused of scientism here, because scientists don't get offended about the process, but oh boy, can they get cross with one another and have heated debates about the topics.
Oh yeah,
Have you?
yeah, yeah,
Have,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
granted,
Scientists
but
are human. Yeah,
uh,
yeah, and they can
dinosaurs.
argue. They can argue strongly for their particular position. Sure. Mm.
Have you heard about the dinosaur wars?
Which dinosaur wars are these?
It's the ones I don't know. I'll have to look it up. It's in Bill Bryson's book, A Very Short History of Nearly Everything. But
Oh yeah, yeah. I have read
it's
that long time ago.
yeah.
Good book.
I'm rereading it at the moment again. But there was a very rich dinosaur fossil field that was discovered, I think, in Utah somewhere. And there were
Mm,
these two opposing. They started out as geologists because they weren't paleontologists in those days,
mm,
and they
yeah.
sort of they had opposing theories about or hypotheses about certain aspects of the
Mm,
fossils, and
mm,
they each had teams of people who helped them to dig these
mm.
up, and it got so heated that they were. But we're talking about the American Wild West and the period as well.
Yes,
Actually, gunfights between these two
yes, yes.
geologists.
Well, in that case, what they were doing, because this was in the infancy of geology, so it wasn't just a purely academic pursuit. It was a collection thing, and
Also,
there were there were rich museum owners that paid them for nice fossils. So actually, what they were fighting over was wealth.
doesn't it always boil down to wealth, John? Money makes the
Mhm.
world go round. Oh, that's another topic we must have. Are we allowed to have a little bit of a more political topic one day? And maybe talk to a political analyst about, maybe more in an academic fashion, about definitions of communism, socialism,
Oh,
capitalism, uh,
oh, yeah,
but more from an academic point of view, because I have discussions with mostly my husband, who tolerates me when I can't sleep, and then I want to have proper academic discussions, because you only have 1 hour a week for me. So and he often asks me things because I mean he's a mechanical engineer. He's way smarter than I am, and he works very hard. So he doesn't have nearly as much time as I have to read all sorts of obscure works and watch YouTube videos to educate myself on all sorts of topics that interest me. And he often I will say something and then he'll ask about, so what is communism? And then when I begin to answer, I realize I have an idea, but I don't really know how to
yeah,
explain it. And
yeah.
then I go and I find some books, or I read something, or I watch a
Mm,
video, but and
mm,
and it's actually phenomenally interesting. And the only conclusion that I've come to so far is that we we're at the terms have become so common that they've actually lost much of their
yeah, yeah,
meaning. That
mm, yeah.
um, and I think that might be an interesting topic of conversation. So you're making notes. We've got John Wathy,
I've got
or
that.
yes, and then we have Robert. We're
Yeah.
going to get to Robert Sapolsky time and time again, John. You're going to have to bear with me on this one. And then we have a political scientist. So if you know, but I'll do my thing
Mm,
here. I know a
mm.
few. I know a few. I just don't know how how good their English are. But
Some time ago, I did have a politician in an hour chat like this. It was he was a member of the European Parliament back in the days when the UK was in the EU,
but
and
wasn't he
he
the philosopher who was on the ethics? That's not the ethicist.
no,
This is a
no, not him, no, no, not Blay Whitby. No, this was
this
I'm
was
not sure if I'm going to be able to remember his name, but he was a Liberal Democrat member of the European Parliament, and we had I think we just had the Brexit referendum, and as you know, the result was disastrous, that we should withdraw from the EU. And I had him on. It must have been a bit after that because he just ceased to be an MEP. So we'd obviously moved on and actually left. And so he gave me a rundown of the state of politics at that time. So I'm not against discussing politics. In fact, I used to be a minor politician myself many years
but
ago.
I prefer political analysts to politicians. You know whom I might ask if I use some of my contacts. Melanie Verwoerd. So she was once the ambassador to Ireland, the South African ambassador to Ireland, and she is she was married to the grandson of the architect of apartheid, H.F. Verwoerd. And in the 1980s, she and her now ex-husband shocked the white people of South Africa by joining the ANC. And she was also ambassador to South African ambassador to or the UNICEF ambassador.
Yeah. She would be interesting. See if you can get her.
Do my best. You can Google her as well. Melanie, Melanie, Verwoerd. And come on, John. You've got to say another R for tonight. Please, man.
Verwoerd. I can't spell it. I don't know how to spell that.
VER.
Yeah.
WOERD.
Oh, do you know, I was only one letter wrong. I hadn't got an E. But I put the E. I squeezed the E in.
Okay, so you.
Okay. It would be interesting. But on the subject of communism, there's different flavors of it, of course. That Marx had one idea and Lenin had another, and then Stalin had another one, and of course then Mao Zedong came, and none of them are successful. They're all based on a dream.
Hang on. The first ever communist is very successful, and that was Jesus.
Well, he's not here to argue his position. I think he might prefer to label himself as a socialist rather than a communist.
I suppose you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. Yes. Yeah.
Except that his followers, today's followers, wouldn't like that, would they?
No, not at all. No, not at all.
They're very much on the right wing.
Yeah. Can you believe that we've spent almost an hour, 3 minutes short of 2 minutes short of an hour, just talking nonsense? How do we do this? We don't need a guest.
Yeah. So it's time for you to announce our next real guest. I'm sorry that Tyler hasn't managed to make it today, but yes. You've booked Kenneth, haven't you? And we've actually got 2 weeks off because it's the Christmas festivities. However, I do want to announce that I will still be making Global Atheist News shows and attempting at least one more Views on the News show. And I hope you'll be able to come because I want it to be partly Views on the News and partly Christmas greetings from Free Thought Productions, from all our team around the world. Little clips.
Well, I'm almost guaranteed to be available tomorrow night because my youngest son, Hanu, is on the way back on the bus. I pick him up tomorrow morning, and then he will probably rest because he's been working on the farm like a laborer, which is good for an almost 17-year-old.
Absolutely. Yes. Send them out to work. Yes.
And he'll be 17. I'll have a 17-year-old son on Monday. Can you believe that, John? My youngest son will be 17. But I will definitely be available because I don't have to cook for anybody. I'm a free agent. I'm free. I'm free from everything. But
well, before you run down the street shouting free, tell us about Ken
Daniels. And we've had a few postponements, but we've confirmed with Kenneth Daniels. He wrote a book that was instrumental in my deconversion. It's called Why I Believed. He was a former missionary. He worked in deepest, darkest Africa. He translated the Bible. He invented a lexicography for a Sudanese group. And his book is amazing. I'm rereading it for the second time. I'm making copious notes. I can't wait to interview Kenneth Daniels. I think it'll be great. He's the lesser known version of Dan Barker.
Uh-huh.
He's many parallels, and I can't wait. I'm very
Great.
much looking
Okay.
forward to it.
Well,
That
that'll
will be
be on January the 6th. January the
January.
6th, 2024. Yes. Tercia, thank you.
John, it was
See you.
lovely as
Absolutely. See you again tomorrow. Say bye-bye.
See you. Goodbye.